Good morning to all the folks who are joining us via the live stream. We're going to be starting the Bible study here shortly, but before that point, because I was at the convention, people are asking, well, what happened at the convention? So I'm going to share some of the things that happened at convention. This is going to be a very quick and dirty overview, so I'm just a lot to cover. Some of it was we had a lot to get through that really we didn't have a lot to discuss about them because they were kind of the mom and apple pie type things. That if anybody's going to disagree with them, it's because they just thought something could have been worded a little bit better. And we had set the standing rules that we're not going to spend a lot of time just perfecting the wording on things that are clear enough as it is. We are only going to make substantive edits to resolutions.
And they abided by that?
More or less. There was one amendment one resolution I really wanted to make an amendment to, and I'll get to that in a bit. But, to start off our weekend, of course, we had the opening worship, which some of y'all are looking at because I brought back the books that they had for us for the services. The opening service was fantastic, absolutely beautiful. I've said it before, I'll say it again. When we get together, we can't help but show off. And so we had some very excellent musicians, fantastic songs. We had a very excellent liturgist who had a great voice for chanting, and good sermons. A lot of good sermons, all around the theme of we preach Christ crucified, which was our theme for the convention. We preach Christ crucified. You saw that all over the place. It made it really easy to figure out where it was involved with the convention, because you see people around with something that we preach Christ crucified on. And there was 1,014 delegates there. So this wasn't a small deal. And that's just the delegates. There was a lot of our auxiliary and RSO ministries there because they set up booths in the exhibit hall. I thought if you wanted to make sure you were decked out with ink pens for the rest of the year, maybe for the next decade, that was the place to go. I still remember back when I was at SEM and the convention was at St. Louis that summer. My buddies and I, we went into the exhibit floor and we cleaned up. I didn't have to buy another pen the rest of the time I was at seminary. Plus, like CPH had like their full store there that they travel with, and at Crucium, the liturgical marketplace was there, and boy, it was probably good I was flying because I had to come home broke. They did have Meet the Author things going on, and unfortunately, because of the way schedules worked out, I just was never able to be over there when they were doing that. But it is what it is.
Who were some of those people?
Well, one of the ones I know for certain was the artist known as Flame. He's a rapper, recently converted to Lutheranism.
Like the past couple years?
Yeah, like the last several years. He's been a Christian rapper for a while, and one of his buddies heard that he was really trying to continue his education, and he said, "Why don't you go over to that seminary over in St. Louis?" Talking about Concordia, maybe they can help you with some of the questions you're asking. And he ended up going there, and I was like, all of a sudden it just all clicked. And he was he was actually one of our special presenters. Fantastic speaker. I still want to hear him perform. I still haven't got to hear him perform live. And I'm not the biggest rap fan in the world, but it's still kind of neat. Especially with the things that he includes in his music. I mean, he's been working on a project where he's been putting the small catechism and to albums.
Oh,
So he has one that has been on baptism. He's had one that's been on communion. I think he's also worked on one that is from the creed. So,
Called Flame?
yeah, flame.
oh, I'm gonna have to look at that because we were talking to our godson's mother, and they're at a church in Bryan that they won't confirm them until they memorize all these parts of the catechism. Well, he has a learning disability. He's really struggling with it. And he told me on the phone he would be confirmed this year, and he said, I'm just not gonna be confirmed. I can't do it. He's given up. But something like that, I bet he could learn it.
We Sing the Faith is also an excellent resource,
Okay.
which is the entire catechism put to music.
So do they need to memorize all of the main text or also
All the explanations.
I was thinking that is definitely
That's a lot. Now, I could see them memorizing the commandments, the Lord's Prayer, the creed, but he has to memorize all the explanations, and they are not confirmed until they go before the elders and do it.
We had to do that when I was growing
I
up.
did too, but it's not as common
But if
now.
you got a learning disability, it's a different story. There's gotta be.
I mean,
And our next son is autistic, and she said there is no way he's going to be able to.
I do require memorization work now, but I've made concessions for kids with obvious learning disabilities.
You said that was we sing.
Sing the Faith. I think it's actually just Sing the Faith.
Yeah, just Sing the Faith. Because the CD is, I think there's a CD and then
There's
sheet
also
music.
sheet music,
And
but
I think we have both of them. And when I was doing it with the kids, I did like having the sheet music. But it's also, if you sing it along with, it's really easy to just sing
Where
along.
would I find it?
Oh, it's on Concordia. I can't remember
It
if
is
it's also
on
on Amazon.
CPA?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can't remember if it's on Amazon or
I'll
not. But
text her later today and let her know.
our opening business was largely dealing with church fellowship. I can't say issues because they weren't really issues. Only one was an issue. The rest were just confirming that we were establishing altar pulpit fellowship with various churches, and I cannot remember all of them. One was the Lutheran Church in Uganda. Another was the Lutheran Church in Sudan and South Sudan. Don't ask me how that one's working because Sudan and South Sudan do not like each other. In fact, that's actually one of the things they're dealing with is the fact that their two regions are fighting with each other. Another one was I can't remember its full name, but it's the group that split from the state church in Finland. You may have actually heard about two of their more prominent members. Their presiding bishop and a doctor who was a part of the Finnish parliament, because they have been now arrested a few times for breaking speech laws, as they have just written some very simple, straightforward texts that are like homosexuality is wrong, and that it's supposed to be a man and a woman in marriage. Nothing, calling for any violence or actions against gay people or anything. Just this is what the church believes.
It's what God says, not what we believe.
Yeah.
What we believe too, it's what God says.
Yeah,
That is
exactly.
more important.
Yeah. And we actually got to hear from both the bishop and the lady who was the member of parliament. And it was really interesting to hear her. And she's encouraging us to stand firm. And of course, the bishop also was too. And then we also formalized relationships with one of the Lutheran churches in the Ukraine.
I looked up, there was 5 of them. There was the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Ukraine.
Okay.
And the Evangelical Lutheran Mission Diocese of Finland. The Evangelical Lutheran Church of South Sudan.
Yep.
Lutheran Church of Uganda, and the Ceylon Evangelical Lutheran Church.
Ceylon.
Okay.
They're not from Battlestar Galactica.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Ceylon, I think, is actually how it's pronounced. Ceylon.
Didn't we stop fellowship with the church?
Yes, we did. That was actually one of our sad businesses.
Yeah,
We cut ties with the Japanese Lutheran Church as they decided to ordain women. So they said we're going to have to sever fellowship. That was a really sad story. As it turns out, something could have happened a few decades ago that may have stopped this from happening. But we were in the midst of our own problems with Seminex, and people didn't notice it was starting to happen.
The devil finds a way, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He'll use every opportunity he can take.
Oh yeah, that is most definitely true. And so, once Senate had figured out something was going on, they've been working on this for like the past 20 years, trying to get this taken care of. But it went nowhere.
But we do have missionaries in Japan.
We are actually, I think there is like maybe one or two right now. We are now, of course, having to scramble to establish independent missionaries. Because originally we were just working with the Japanese Lutheran Church and helping them out, and that was the main source of missions in Japan. Now we got to switch gears. So that was the beginnings of our convention process. And we got to hear from all the presiding bishops except one, and that was because his visa was denied. The presentation from the Ukrainian church was really interesting. It was back when Russia started invading Ukraine. Synod had contacted their leadership and asked, "What do you guys need?" And they had responded, "We need helmets and flak jackets." Because most of their congregations live on the occupied side of the lines.
And they said here 70% of their members have been scattered by the war.
Yeah. And so that they're having to cross the battlefields to get to the members to visit them and to do ministry with them. So they wanted helmets and flak jackets to protect their pastors who were doing this. And they presented Harrison this week with one of the helmets that had been sent. It was beat to decades. And they presented it to him because it was one of the helmets we had sent, and it had saved the life of the presiding bishop, who was in a convoy heading over with other pastors to do pastoral ministry, and was attacked by drone-launched rockets. It took a hit. His flak jacket got peppered. He was wounded in the attack, but because of the gear he survived. And then apparently another pastor used it later, and it saved his life too. So they presented it to Harrison on the day we voted to formalize ultra-public fellowship. And Harrison said, "We're going to turn this over to Concordia Historic Institute, where I'll probably be put on display." If you're in the St. Louis area, I would encourage you to go visit the Concordia Historical Institute. They always have some neat displays up there. Plus, it's where all of the archives are at. So if you want to dig through church archives, you can do that. And then
It's on the seminary campus, isn't it?
Yes.
I thought so. I've been there. I thought that's where it was.
Yep.
The seminaries need to visit too. If you go to St. Louis, go visit the seminary. The chapel alone is worth seeing.
Mm-hmm. Both chapels. The Chapel of the Apostles and the Chapel of St. Timothy and Titus. Those are fantastic.
Even the president's house is impressive.
Yeah.
I don't know if the new president likes flowers as much as the old one did, but I'd be curious to see.
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't really know Pastor Ager all that well, so. I got to know John Johnson and I got to know Dale Meyer because they were the presidents when I was there, and they would actually come and be with the students. But since I'm not there, I don't get a chance to spend time with Pastor Ager. And then after we did all the fellowship issues, we did start getting into some of the resolutions. And the one that's going to be close to home is the dealing with what's happening at Concordia Austin. The convention did vote to formally reprimand the president of Concordia Austin and the Board of Regents and faculty who supported the move for separation and issued a call for repentance. And more or less, I would say it was a reasonable resolution. We did get to hear from President Newman and a few others who were involved. To say things are a mess would probably be put it lightly. And so people were acknowledging, yes, there was an issue with communications and the like, but it still did not excuse the wrongful separation of Concordia Austin from the Concordia University system. And so, at least listening to Newman, hopefully there's going to be some resolution here in the next year.
What's our main sticking points?
Okay, so previous convention, it was voted that there needed to be a reorganization of the Concordia University system. And particularly in response to the fact we have now lost 3 of the Concordias. Concordia Selma closed, Portland and Bronxville. Selma was always a really small school, always really struggling. I was surprised it stayed open for so long. I'm still sad to see it close because it was one of our historic black universities. Rosa Parks was a graduate of Concordia Selma. Yeah, so it was even as small as it was a real blow. Bronxville, they were also struggling because they're a small school, lots of hot competition where they're out for small liberal arts schools. COVID was kind of the nail in their coffin. There may have been some other things going on, I don't know, but I do know COVID was kind of the last straw. The COVID camel's back. Portland, they were having some struggles, but their biggest issue, I think, that led to their closing is they signed a really bad deal. They were trying to get into the online schooling, and they had actually developed a large student body online. It should have been successful. We just inked a deal with the wrong company. There was no way that they could have actually turned a profit. I talked a couple of years, when this first went down, I talked with Dwayne and told him, and he said, yeah, we at Austin, we had looked, the same company had made an offer to us, and we took a look at it and said, this ain't kosher. And they went in a different direction for doing their online stuff. And so they decided last convention we're going to be reorganizing some things. And it was the fallout that happened with Concordia Austin happened during the meetings for the reorganization. The claim is that there was not clear communication. Senate wasn't telling them things. I don't know any details, so I can't tell what's going on there. I've heard from a couple sources that I trust that there was an issue. That's about the most I can say. And then last November, they voted to separate from the system. And the Senate said, no, this can't happen, and then they reaffirmed the vote back in April.
And they did indeed file new incorporation papers.
Yeah, and they filed new corporation papers with the state of Texas. I don't know where that's going to go. I know Don Christensen was given a chance to talk, and I was really sad when he said they were going to continue with the whole self-governance thing. Because I think things would have turned out very differently for Austin if he'd said, we're willing to walk away from it. because there was a sentiment during the debate of changing the resolution to some extent. And when he got up and said that resolution was not going to be amended.
Is it because of Austin being more liberal, or what's the underlying force here?
It has something to do with the Senate wanting to direct who is in charge. So the Concordia University Systems has pretty much authority over president. It has something to do with that.
The new setup, if I understand it correctly, they still get to select their list. So they still get to put names forward. And it's kind of similar to what congregations do when putting together their lists for the pastor. But it has differences. One of the differences is the Board of Regents comes up with a list of qualifications that they're looking for and the president. And then they send that off, and I believe they're also allowed to put names onto the list. And then it goes to the Concordia University Board of Directors and the Presidium, which includes the synodical president, district president, and vice presidents of the Senate. And they yay or nay the candidates. Then they send back the list and the like. How exactly that is going to work out remains to be seen. Plus, there was also an establishment of financial oversight with the board of directors of Senate. And I can understand why the universities would be a little hesitant over that one, because that's just going to add a layer of bureaucracy. But at the same time, I was looking at that and going with Portland in mind, going, maybe if somebody from outside the system was looking at the numbers going, hey, this isn't right, we might still have Portland. So I was like, on that one, I was like, I can see both sides here. With some of the ecclesiastical supervision of the universities, I was actually surprised this wasn't in place already, because of what we went through with Semenex and the walkout there, and the issues we were having with Concordia St. Louis.
Not every professor at our Concordia systems are Lutherans, so that's also
I was thinking I was just
needs some supervision, because sometimes I don't even know if it's a requirement that they be Christians.
I think that the requirement is they have to abide by our theological understandings. And they can be removed for cause for teaching against theological understandings.
And that has happened.
Yeah.
And Texas too.
I can't give you all the ins and outs of the revamp, which was also voted in. And that's probably because it was like a 20-page resolution.
Yeah, I wondered if that passed.
It did pass.
Part of Concordia, Texas's beef in the miscommunication was they wanted that 20-page resolution before convention, and they wouldn't give it to them. So they had no way to rebut it because they didn't know what was in it until the week before when they did open meetings, which is not a lot of time when you've got a 20-page document coming down. And there were some things they heard were going to be in it that didn't go with what the Board of Regents of Concordia, Texas agrees on. And so they were wanting time to look at it and have it. And Senate wouldn't give it to them. Senate says they didn't ask for it. Concordia, Texas says they didn't give it to us. Who knows?
To be honest, I'm not sure the finished document was done until like about a month or
But
so.
they wouldn't even give them a peek at what they were proposing to put out there. They felt like they had a right to see that.
And I do know that one of the deciding factors for that resolution was the other Concordia presidents had gotten up and said, we support the resolution.
all of whom have been appointed by Harrison.
No.
Every one of them.
No, they're selected by the board of regents.
Harrison takes off the names if he doesn't like them, so he has a lot of control. A lot of control.
I mean, I can kind of see why, just in general, LC, but I just had read a blog post, and this was from another Christian, so he was just looking at the Christian schools he's taught at and the Christian schools that he's seen, and he was saying that in like a lot of cases, that like the president was really key, that when they picked presidents that weren't theologically experienced, not just in the sense of theologically sound, but not theologically experienced, they weren't able to do effective oversight over their staff and whatnot. And he was also talking about with professors. I'm kind of glad the Concordia system does differently. You don't have to profess Christianity, you just have to agree to abide by them. Because he said a lot of cases, colleagues would tell, like, all right, so professors that the staff wanted, all right, they were not Christian or not the kind of Christian that the school wanted, so the other staff coached them on how to, lie to get past the theological, interview, and that obviously didn't do anybody any favors there. But he was saying that he did feel that both having a solid president as well as actually, that having faculty that are the Christians they proclaim to be, or at least, was really important. That in many of the cases, that's kind of, though if you didn't have a president who could oversee or wanted to oversee, and then you had people subverting the process, it went badly. And that he was talking about the context of students losing their faith at a Christian university because the professors themselves were deliberately undermining, kind of the naive faith, that they were over there trying to make it more difficult. They were like evangelists against what the university taught. And that obviously is a very bad situation that you want to avoid. And I guess, constant vigilance.
Wow.
Again, the devil finds his way.
Yeah.
It does.
Yep.
Unfortunately.
And let's see here. I'm going to go on to some of the other resolutions now, just I don't want to spend all my time on just a couple, which I know are near and dear to our hearts because we're Texas, and Concordia's Austin's here in Texas, even though we don't like to acknowledge Austin.
Concordia, Texas. Concordia, Austin.
They will always be Concordia, Austin to me, just like Concordia, Chicago is always going to be River Forest to me, and Concordia, Nebraska is always going to be Seward to me.
They tried to change it.
I got used to saying Q&A for Concordia, Nebraska. My youth used to get annoyed at me because I'd like to try and call Concordia, Chicago Cukes. I did have a couple of my youth that ended up at the River Forest. And both of them married guys who became pastors. One knew it going in because she was already dating the guy before they started at River Forest, that he was going to go into the pastor. He was in the Navy at the time, and they met during Ongoing Ambassadors for Christ, which is a youth mission organization. But anyhow, on to our other resolutions. We did have a resolution which formally condemned the practice of online communion, which some churches started doing during COVID, where they would send little prepackaged communion kits to people's houses, and they were to put them in front of the TVs or computers during that part of the service. We decided that is theologically questionable and definitely pastoral care questionable as to whether or not that should be done. And so that resolution passed rather easily. Not kosher. And one of our DPs did get up at that point and state that we don't want people to think that this is like a major problem in our Synod. I think there's like about 20 churches that are still doing this. And yes, your DPs are working with them to get them to stop. And that one actually kind of came near and dear to my heart because I know my in-laws are one of those churches.
I don't know if they're still doing it, but they did it during COVID.
Yeah, I think some of the things your mom has said, it might still be going on. But hopefully it's ended. Lord willing, it's ended. Another one which was near and dear to my heart, and I think is an excellent move on the part of our Senate on behalf of our ladies, is we did vote in a resolution that stated that we are against the idea of drafting women into the military, which grants them the ability to claim conscientious objectors should said draft ever happen. This was one that we were working on proactively, particularly because they keep trying to pass that in Congress right now.
Because it went down for the third time?
Yeah, it went down for the third time. I don't know if it actually made it to the floor of the Senate and it was voted down, or is killed in committee. I can't remember which. So we did vote on that one. There was a resolution to send requesting that CTCR come up with good guidelines for doing online services in a good and beneficial fashion. So because they're like, okay, so we all got thrown into the deep end. Let's take a couple steps back and go, okay, how should we actually go about doing this?
So in that communion one, did they recommend that you turn off your live stream for communion?
That would fall under the one where they go to CTCR.
Investigate? Okay.
That may actually come down. The churches were already starting to do that practice. I hadn't, because so many of our folks want to stick around to the announcements. And I really don't like putting the announcements in the middle of the service because it just disrupts everything. I've been in a church that did that, and wow, that was like kill the momentum type thing. And so, and my position's always been over here. I'm going to continue it for now until I find out it's a problem. If I find out it's a problem, I'm killing it. And we'll stop at the end of prayers. And we'll figure out something else for announcements. But until then, I was like, I don't really want to stop it if we don't have to.
I know my mother's church, they moved communion until after the closing hymn, so that they can kill the live stream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which then it doesn't seem like it's part of the service.
I know.
They're all against it because they're not, and they're also still not going forward for communion because of the live stream. They're taking it to their seats still. And they're all against that and won't go forward.
Yeah. It was an old practice of the church that they would have two benedictions. They would do the service of the word, so that, like the readings and the preaching and the prayers, and then they would dismiss all the catechumens and visitors, and then they would have communion after that point, which is how we ended up with the whole gossip that we're eating babies and things like that, because we didn't allow people who weren't a part of the congregation to be present for that part. That was the old school way of doing closed communion. I know one of our congregations in our area that was, one of, I hate to say progressive, but more contemporary, was actually trying to do that, where they would do their service, and then they would dismiss all the people who weren't members with an invitation to become a member, and so that they can join with the next part of the service. I don't know how it's gone though. I lost contact with the people who were there. In fact, I don't think they're there anymore. So that those also went through. There was another resolution about the use of particular things in communion, like the pre-prepared communion kits, or as I like to call them, the lunchable communion kits. So if you want to know my opinion of those things, there it is. I'm not a fan of those. And this one I'm a little concerned because one of the things that they sent to CTCR was the use of non-wheat hosts. because objections had been raised about doing that.
Hmm.
So one of the things I'm going to be doing this way is figuring out how do I contact CTCR so that I can give them our perspective of things. As because we deal with people who are medically necessary gluten-free.
Yeah, like your sister, she
Yeah,
go into
she carries an EpiPen
Yeah,
because hers is bad enough.
yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty bad.
And well, I really part of the reason I want to talk with them is because I want them to hear Abby's perspective, which was it's bread.
Yeah.
That's
That's the only bread she eats. So
it's,
it's
the
still
only,
bread.
it's the only bread she knows.
Yeah.
Because she's grown up gluten free. And same with my nephew, Ben, who y'all got to meet at VBS. He's been gluten free from an early age, so that's all he's ever known. And part of the concern is that we're introducing an element of doubt. And I can say we're not, because as far this is bread. And I won't quote them my older teenage daughter's opinions. I'll give them the paraphrased, which was bread is bread.
They should speak to some people that are truly gluten free and medically so before they make that.
Well, that's one of the reasons I want
The
to
same
talk
thing with the non-alcoholic wine. A true alcoholic will tell you that that will break their 12-step program, and they start over at square one, and they're not willing. And I know we don't always agree with that, but it's that
Well, no, I was
person's
gonna say,
belief.
it will depend on the alcoholic, because I've had some that had no problems at all. with
Right,
their
but if that's the alcoholic's belief, that sends them back to square one, and 20 years of sobriety is down the drain because they took communion.
in this case, they were actually looking at, rather than the use of non-alcoholic wine, which has been the recommendation now for a while, the non-alcoholic wine or the very highly diluted wine has been the two recommendations that we've had from CTCR. So theirs was churches that are continuing to still use grape juice.
Yeah.
Which we're going, that is actually materially different. We don't want to introduce that. Especially when we have other routes that we can take that are legitimate, even according to people that trouble with alcohol. So that was also included, but the one that for me, of course, was the non-wheat. I was like, come on, guys, bread is bread.
So did they offer either one of those options at the convention?
I do not think so.
They didn't.
I know they did not do.
We did 2 years ago at LWML, but then this time around we did not.
As
And
far
I
as
think that's the presiding congregation's
Mhm.
ruling on that, and the presiding congregation must not have agreed with it in Milwaukee.
yeah, that's my guess because I think we just had the normal stuff.
Was it all common cup?
Yeah.
So
And
they
I-
still had trays of individual at LWML. They encouraged you not to do that unless you strongly felt like you had to, because they didn't have a lot of it. But there were some people that just still don't want to take common cup. I mean, we still have people at the LWML convention wearing masks that came from different parts of the country.
We still had a few people too.
Yeah.
Let's hear any other.
You're from New York City, you still wear your mask. And I can't say I blame them. Partly because it would help bring down all the smell of the weed that they smoke in New York City.
Yeah, we won't go there.
No.
Trying to think of other resolutions that really stuck out. 'Cause I said I was only going to do a short.
Yeah, and you've done the whole class.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry
Sounds
about that.
inevitable.
Yeah, it was inevitable, especially with having to talk about Austin.
Yeah.
With that being such a specific ministry pastor.
Is that what you wanted to ask him about?
Yeah, anything changed?
No, nothing changed with SMB. Part of me wanted to change it a little bit because I think some of our larger congregations are abusing it. But that one was almost, that one, that's a surprising amount of conversation. And it was over something that was completely inconsequential. One person objected to the fact that there was in the whereases for one of the resolves was that we should still strongly encourage guys to go to residential, as that is the gold standard for teaching pastors. Because it is a more rigorous program. Plus, you also get all we're throwing you in the deep end kind of stuff, but not actually throwing you in the deep end, where you're working in congregations. And it's not perfect, but it's still an excellent system. And people were, and somebody wanted to amend it so it wasn't saying strongly encouraged. Yeah,
I want to say slightly encouraged.
you're going to get my opinion. I thought it was a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
Because I know how the DPs are operating. And some of that is because I have personal experience. I'm pretty sure Newman is strongly encouraging guys to consider residential training for becoming a pastor. And I also know that he is taking into account the individual contexts and placing SMP guys in places where SMP is generally a good thing, like Fairfield. Fairfield does have a guy who's going into the SMP program. He had decided to go with somebody else as his pastoral supervisor, and that's whatever. And so Fairfield is a prime example of a place that can use an SMP guy. They're a very small congregation. They cannot afford a guy who can go to the seminary, and the guy there would not be well suited for going to residential. Not that I'm not saying he's not smart or anything. It's just context works.
Financial too.
Yeah, the context works.
I think Franklin is too, isn't it? Or Bill.
Yeah, Franklin was is SMP too.
Yeah, he's 63, 64, 65.
Yeah. And so these are cases, and they're doing both programs. I don't see why we need to argue over this. Still can't.
And that's really the DP's job, to make sure that it's appropriate.
Mhm.
So if there's a congregation misusing that, that's the DP's job to go in there and fix that problem.
Mhm.
Because he's the ecclesiastical supervisor, he's the one who should be overseeing all of that. And that can't come from the top, it's got to come within each context, like you said.
This is one of those ones where Senate can put down some new requirements that would be what the DPs would use, and they're establishing their guidelines. But
Pepkin's son-in-law is in the SMP
yeah, he's
program
an SMP guy.
in San Antonio, so.
Again, it's another small congregation.
And in our culturally diverse congregations, most of those, if they can find somebody in the community that's willing to do the studying, they gotta work full time. That's the only way they can support their families.
Those guys go into what's called the EIT, the Ethnic Institute of Theology, which is a distance learning program that the seminaries are in. And those guys, they do mostly distance learning, and then like the summers or the summer quarters, they'll show up for like 4 weeks or something. So they've got one-on-one, well, not one-on-one, but in-person teaching happening and the like. S&P has that a little bit too. But, so I was just, I can't believe we spent 40 minutes between two resolutions.
Were those two resolutions anyway?
They were neighbors. There was one that was the encouraging the guys going to the seminary for residential training, and then there was the encouragement of using the S&P program where appropriate. The two resolutions next door to each other, and the same guy wanted to amend both of them. I was like, come on, you knew from the first one your amendment was going to go down. Why did you do it for the second one?
Is there any programs where they're attempting to find a way to get our pastors, the number of pastors out there, increased?
Yeah, well,
rather than using
the seminaries have reinstituted the guaranteed tuition. That fell apart a couple of years after I had gone through. It was one of those cases that they were too successful. But they brought it back where guys don't have to pay the tuition, but it is still incredibly expensive. I was one of the guys with guaranteed tuition, and I still have a very large student debt because of seminary. Because yes, I didn't pay tuition, but I still had to pay room and board. I still had to pay for the state required medical insurance.
I was thinking that was the biggest one, that it wasn't too bad for him when we got married. That even though I think that insurance was running at a deficit, because there's a lot of women at seminary having babies, and I don't think the policy was enough to cover that, but it was still, your students, it was still a major expense. But,
and that was mostly paid for by loans.
well, that and part-time work, which, you know.
Yeah. The students really couldn't get jobs that could really cover that stuff. And I had a job all through seminary, but that was mostly covering my car payments and my car insurance, and the occasional out to eat with my friends. So.
Right, I was wondering how it went, because when Keith went there, they worked really hard. They were really trying to get more people in the seminary. And right, it went too well. They were having problems placing guys when Keith was there. So I could kind of see that after a few years of you're having problems placing your graduates, it does feel like, right, we might be having a pastor shortage in 20 years, but if you can't place them now, it's hard to figure out how to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard some older pastors say it's because pastors aren't retiring in a good way. And there were some that were staying till they were 80, 85, and so there weren't any openings. But now that's going the other direction. Now we're seeing this next group coming through, and they're all retiring at 65.
But I was wondering, also how much of it was there were congregations with vacancies, but they could not support a pastor, or have gone through several pastors recently, and you do not want to place a seminary grad there to get you to.
Anyhow, we got to wrap up. This
Oh,
is like
yeah.
10 minutes
Oh, wow,
of
yeah.
service, so let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for everybody who went to the convention this last week, and we ask that you would continue to bless us, and we hope that everyone was able to get back home safely. We ask that you would also continue to bless our synod as we walk forward together, that the issues that have come up may be resolved, and that there may be healing within our synod, particularly with the fallout of the Concordia system. And we also ask that you would guide back the Japanese Lutheran Church, that they would return to your sound teaching, that the gospel may continue to dominate and be proclaimed. And plus we ask for our church that you would guide us, that you would help us in the mission to preach Christ crucified. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.